Today we are with Luke Janssen, sorry, from Tytle. Tytle is a one-stop shop for tax advice and much more. We already talked about that in this video a bit, but now Luke will answer us some questions of our viewers from the first video that we made about Spain that you can find right here on this link up if you didn't watch it yet. And some of those questions are quite interesting because a lot of people asked about that in the comment section. Others are a bit more specific. And if there is any other question that you might have that we didn't answer today, feel free to ask them in the comment section. As always, we will try our best to answer together with Tytle, together with our partner of today's video. So, Luke, have a good morning. Actually, for you, it's still good afternoon. Good morning yet, right?
No, it is good morning. I am currently in New York City.
For us in Europe, it's already evening. So, good morning, Luke.
Thank you. Good evening to you.
Thank you. One of the questions that many of our viewers asked more than once about the inheritance tax in Spain, how it works for expats.
Yeah, the inheritance tax in general is quite complicated in Spain, mainly because of all the regions in Spain. You've got about 17 regions in Spain, and they all can set also their own taxation rules and have their own exemptions and deductions, for example. Not all of them. So it can get quite complicated. But the first thing to note is that as an expat coming to Spain, you are going to be a Spanish resident. And if you are Spanish resident, your inheritance tax that you will leave to the beneficiaries will be taxed on your all worldwide assets. So that's a big difference than just the Spanish assets. So for example, if you're an expat and you have a property in Spain, then not only the property will fall under the kind of inheritance tax application, it will be your worldwide assets. So that is a really big difference. Of course, you have to think about that ahead of time and you have to plan for that. So for example, if you are a couple, and I'm only talking about just general rules, right? Not even about the kind of regions right now. Sorry, 1 second. So if you are an expat couple, you come as a couple and you buy a property together, for example, the property itself is also subject to inheritance tax, but from both sides, right? So if the deceased spouse, you have to also pay tax on that portion of that property, right? But you can get also regional exemptions on that, especially if the property was a family home. So for example, in Valencia, there's a lot of exemptions and deductions if the like residence was used as a primary family home, right? So there's already one of the first differences when it comes to the regions. Yeah, and then you can get into the regions themselves. So there is a national level framework for inheritance tax, but then the regions, like I said before, can have different deductions and exemptions. And it's also very important with these deductions and exemptions how close the beneficiary is to the deceased person. So they usually work with groups in Spain. So group 1 is the closest, and that is your children, your direct children. And then group 2 is the spouse, and group 3 is more the like the older family members, like relatives. And then 4 is the very distant relatives. And so the closer you are to the person who was deceased, the more benefits you get. So if you are a direct child of the deceased and you are under 21, you get even more benefits. So there's a certain sum that you multiply with each year under 21, and then you get that exemption or deduction from the total taxes payable. So that's just a general overview of the taxes in Spain. In general, it can range from like 7.5% to 34%, the total inheritance. And that all depends on the value of the assets, of course, of the estate that's left behind, and the relationship to the deceased. Some regions even offer 99 to 100% complete exemption in some regions. Generally, the harshest of the regions is Asturias. That's generally the case with tax rules in Spain.
Interesting. So even when you say that in some cases it can go as low as 7.5%, that is a remarkable number because a lot of our viewers, for example, they are from the UK. And the lowest bracket for inheritance tax in the UK is 20%. So that makes Spain quite attractive from this point of view in terms of inheritance tax, because they can pay less than half of they would pay in the UK. That's remarkable.
Yeah, it can be really good. It can be really good. You just have to plan for it. And it also depends on the regions, like I said before. So for example, Madrid and Andalusia, they are generally really beneficial regions for tax purposes and for inheritance tax purposes as well. So it's all required, it requires planning and making sure you know what you're doing. On top of that, it's also important to have a will, right? A will applies to a certain law. And if you don't have a Spanish will registered in the will bank, then the general rule will apply in Spain, which is that, for example, 2/3 of your estate will go to your children and the rest, for example, to your spouse, even if you didn't want that, right? But you didn't have a will in Spain registered. So only since quite a short period, back in the day, this was not possible, but you can add in your will to whom you want to leave your estate, but also to which law you want to apply. And in some cases, maybe in most cases, it really depends what you're planning, where you're planning to move to, and how you're planning to kind of evolve over the next years with your assets. The law in your home country from where you move to and maybe where you have nationality may be beneficial, and you can put that into the will in Spain as well. So to really get a full picture of this, you have to talk to a tax professional and a kind of estate lawyer, inheritance tax lawyer. So we can help you with that, of course. Especially the tax side is our bread and butter. But the general regions that are beneficial are Madrid, Andalusia, and the more harsher regions are the regions like Asturias, for example.
That's great. That's a really good answer. Really interesting. Another thing that some of our viewers ask is actually, one of our viewers just wrote his whole situation that I'm going to tell right now. Is, quote, I am a US citizen and my husband has dual US and Spanish citizenship, born in Zaragoza. We are hoping to move to Spain, researching the potential hefty tax implications. Is there something special we should know regarding the autonomous community of Castilla and Leon?
Mm-hmm. So yes, always tax implications. So the general personal income tax, because we're talking about mainly income tax, I guess here, and maybe wealth tax. The general income tax in Asturias, Castilla and Leon is quite good. So it is 9.5% to 8.5% in that region, right? And to just recap a little bit, that you have the regions and then you got the national level. And so combined, they will give rise to your total tax burden. So 8.5% to 9% is one of the lowest in Spain in all the Spanish regions. So from that perspective, you are set up very well for having quite a low exposure to personal income taxes. Wealth taxes, there is nothing special in Castilla y Leon relative to other regions. So you just basically follow the like national framework for wealth taxes. Yep.
Very good. It's quite attractive.
It's quite attractive. Yeah, it's quite attractive. Yep.
Another case one of our viewers sent to us, and this is, in fact, it also caused to me a lot of personal interest. It's about special economic zone, the ZEC, in the Canary Islands, because it's everyone that lives in Europe know that the VAT here, the value aggregated tax, is quite high in nearly every European country. 21 here where I live is 21%. In Hungary is higher. In many parts of Spain it's higher. But in the Canary Islands they have this specific zone where they have their VAT is lower. What can you tell us about the Canary Islands?
Yes, it is generally 7% to stimulate consumerism, of course, and the economy there. So the ZEC is really focused on businesses and tourism. And so from a corporate side, it's also really a beneficial place because you get 4% on corporate taxes instead of the generic 25%. And in some regions in Spain, for example, in the autonomous regions in the north, there can get to 24%. So you may save 1% on corporate taxes. But the Canary Islands are generally very beneficial because it gets down to 4%. Plus there's exemptions as well. So there's exemptions on transfer tax, stamp duty, and I have to look a little bit in my notes, because there's also a withholding exemption. There's no withholding tax, which will mainly come into play, right, if you have a business and you have a parent business, right? You usually have maybe a holding, and then that holding has a daughter business in the Canary Islands that does some economic activity or trading. And that company in the Canary Islands, if they pay dividends to the parent company, there is no withholding tax on like the Canary Island side, which is very beneficial. There's a lot of rules, of course, you have to apply to get that. For example, you have to invest 100,000 euros, have 3 to 5 jobs that you've made in the area within 2 years. But if you get those benefits, it may be very good to start a business there or to have it located there as well. So it's generally very good for just living there, because the VAT is low, and like, who doesn't want to pay lower amount of groceries and restaurants and general living expenses? Plus, doing business there can be very beneficial.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Maybe I'm gonna do an entire video about there, because it's so many people interested in knowing more.
And it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. It's an amazing set of islands.
Very good points. One of my favorite destinations in Europe. There is another case that one of our viewers sent to us. I'm just gonna read a bit of her story. I want to retire to Spain, but my aunt wants to leave me some money in her will. What is the inheritance tax in Spain in this situation? It's going to receive an inheritance in Spain from her aunt that lives outside of Spain. So in this case, she's going to be the inheritor, not she's going to leave the inheritance, as we said before.
Right.
What is this? What she should know? Because I know that in Spain you have autonomous communities, each one of them have their own rules. But in this case, what she should know first and foremost?
Yes. So if she is a resident of Spain, her aunt is not, but she will be the beneficiary of the estate. It's very important what she is leaving behind. So, for example, if it is money, but it's set in a Spanish bank account or something similar, then it's very important to know where that asset is located. So, if the region in Spain is Asturias, then where the asset is located, the bank account, and that may prevail, for getting exemptions and deductions. So it's very important to know where the asset is. Generally, it's also important to know if there is a will made up. So there's a few factors involved here. You kind of need to know, is it only money? Is it, what does the will say? Is there a property that is located in Spain? So all of those things are part of
her aunt has a formal will that established it and previous to her passing away, she must have a will, her aunt, right, registered for avoiding any other legal troubles.
If there are Spanish assets and they don't have a will, then it will, of course, be deferred to, maybe there's a will like abroad that has been registered in Spain, right? Maybe it's not a Spanish will, but there can still be a will registered in Spain. If none of those things apply, then the general rules apply that it will go to the children. So there's generally not a big issue here. Just in the hypothetical case where there was nothing put on paper and there is nothing, there's no family left behind or whatever, the estate you have will go to the Spanish state. So it is important to think about those things. But in this case, if they are a resident of Spain, then it really depends on the whole equation, is kind of what I'm trying to say. Like, where do these assets lay? Like, where do they sit? Is basically the big question mark here.
That's clear. One of the autonomous communities that raised more interest among our viewers, which we didn't talk about them in the first video. In fact, in the first video, we didn't talk about few communities that would demand a lot of time. So to not make the video very long, we didn't talk about those that are a bit more complex. And one of them is the Basque Country, País Vasco. And of course, some of our viewers asked if we could talk more about the Basque Country. And since it's probably the most autonomous of all autonomous communities, what are the tax implications of there, especially regarding one thing that people asked, because they have a different language, a very different language. It's not like other autonomous communities that have similar language and they also use Spanish. So people ask, in terms of tax implications, how complicated it is since it's another autonomous community with a completely different language.
Yeah. So as autonomous as they are and with the language and are very different and the food and everything, the same applies for the fiscal regime and the general taxation regime going on there. So it's one of the few regions that are actually separate from the equalization regime, as you call it, like the redistribution regime across the regions, operated by the Spanish state. So they have a lot of freedom and they get a lot of like freedom in setting their own framework. So the general progressive income tax rates are lower. So it is beneficial to live there. They deviate substantially from the national level. And there is a special focus with deductions and exemptions on like families and housing. So it's really good for like middle income earners. You get a lot of deductions and like tax breaks from that. So from a perspective of which region is better from a tax perspective, then the Basque Country will do really well on this. Yeah.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the questions that our viewers had. I have another question for you. Here you are free to answer according to your opinion, because there are many attractive places in Spain, especially from the taxation side, from the Canary Islands to the Valenciana community, to the Basque Country. But of all the autonomous communities in Spain, which one you would say is maybe not the most attractive? It's actually the one that we would put aside and say, maybe here is not the best place.
But it's just so subjective, right? Like some person would like the city of Valencia, other person would like the city of Madrid. So it's of course a decision like that should never be based purely on if you gain a few percentage here and there. But saying that,
that's very important. That's very well said.
Right, this is very important.
That's very well said.
Yeah, there's such big differences between the regions, but Asturias will likely rank as unfortunately the harshest. So yeah, maybe the North Asturias may not be the best for a fiscal decision.
All right, that's good answer. That's a good answer. Okay, thank you, Loic. So I think that those are most of the questions of our viewers. If anyone has another question, please ask in the comment section. In future videos, we are completely open to answer all of them. Tytle is a one-stop shop for tax advice, filling, bookkeeping, and much more. Loic, thank you very much for your help today. I think our viewers got really satisfied with all your knowledge and insights about taxation in Spain. And I hope to talk to you again. Yeah, thank you for having me. And again, for specific cases, like we mentioned one specific case where it's just a little bit too much to really give a final answer, come talk to us, right? It all depends where your assets lie, where you live, what type of asset. And then we can give you a good overview of what you're facing as well. So, yeah, thank you for having me.